God knows what your heart desires.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you keep repeating that to him, it's like, what, do you not trust in his plan?
Right? You lack faith.
Yeah, lacking faith. And that's just ties into one, what I was like doing throughout that process.
When you're lacking faith, you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, like nothing's changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's because you're looking in the micro instead of looking in the macro of like, God is an almighty God. He's going to operate in the impossible. I can't conceive how God is going to answer my prayers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to show up the way I want it to show up.
Yeah.
It's going to happen in a way that it doesn't make any sense of how. But in that moment, I won't understand it now. But in that moment, then I will.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Equally Yoked
Podcast. And today we are going to be talking about having faith despite the odds.
And boy, those odds, I tell you. So just getting into it, let's just talk about I'll talk about my struggles when it comes to having faith, because we all have those struggles, right? And for example, once I was done, so I used to play basketball in college and I played professionally. And then I had to transition into not playing basketball, trying to transition into my career. And before transitioning into my career, I didn't have like, I guess you would say, quote unquote, real job or whatever. Like, it was just all basketball. I played basketball since the age of 4, and that was all that I knew. And then, so once I was going through that transition, it was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if you're an athlete, an athlete transitioning from, college into the real world, like, how difficult this transition can be, and no one really like
Preps you for it.
yeah, preps you for it at all. And so that was the struggles that I was going through. Like, it took me almost a year
Mm-hmm.
to find a job, because there wasn't that much on my resume. I just had a whole bunch of volunteer opportunities. I had some shadowing and I had what do you call it? Internships.
Yeah.
And so, like, just going through that process without having that resume to back me up, it was like really difficult. And then just in general, in this time right now, it's hard. It's hard to get a job. Anyway, but during that process, like, it was just an up and down battle of just like, when it came to my faith, like, in the very beginning of the process, when I decided to stop playing basketball, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm gonna do. Like, God's got me. Like, I don't need to worry about anything else. But as time went on, I was like,
That faith started getting tested.
it was really getting tested. I'm like, all right, haven't received any emails back. I'm living at home. Time's ticking. Like, what's gonna happen? And so during those cycles, like, I will never forget, like, every night when I went to go take a shower, like, I would sit there in the shower and I'm just like praying to God. I'm like, God, like, this is what I desire. But if it's not in your plan, don't let it be. And I would just have conversation after conversation, like, in the shower all the time. Like, and I would sit there and listen to gospel Christian music, and really just getting in touch with spirit, getting in touch with God. And then I would wake up the next day and I say, here we go, starting the day all over again. Like, just wake up, just, kind of depressed. It's like I'm sitting in the same position. I'm seeing everybody else out living their life, out striving. And here I am. My life was like, to other people, you would think I had the best best life you could ask for. And granted, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunities and
Mm-hmm.
the life that I, was having. But I think, once you like look into it, like how I actually perceived, because I was living with myself, like I knew what truly was going on. And so it was just, my faith was going just up, up and down. And so, I mean, have you had any struggles with that for you?
Yeah, I feel like for me is the hardest part is like the comparison. Like comparison is like the thief of joy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so like when we're out looking exteriorly on other people's lives and like what, because everybody can attest to that. Like everybody thinks the other person's life is better,
Mm-hmm.
right, than your life, or we're so focused on trying to prove that our life is so much better than sometimes what it even really is. But then, like you said, you have to live with you,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end, you have to accept the truth that like my life isn't where I want it to be,
Yeah.
you know, and you kind of have to say like that Jesus in the garden prayer,
Mm-hmm.
or it's like, God, if you can remove this cup from me, right, please do. But like if it's, but your will be done,
Yeah.
type of thing. And it was, I can definitely attest to that. Like I've been in moments, I've even like experienced it recently, where it's like, Lord, this is not necessarily the season that I want to be in,
Mm-hmm.
right? That waiting season. Sometimes you're in that Job season. Speaking of Job, like I have this verse that I feel like was like really good. I feel like once you say everything that you're gonna say, I feel like it like comes it all up. But it says it's Job 22, 21 and 22. And this is like the New Living Translation. It says, submit to God and you will have peace. Then things will go well for you. Listen to his instructions and store them in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like, that's just like such an encouraging thing, but it's way easier to read and harder to live.
Yeah.
But in that, why I said that I feel like that goes really good to what you're saying is simply because like you can't have a testimony without a test,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like in those moments, in that long suffering, that's where God is fortifying our faith. That is where God is saying, okay, let's not to say, let's see if they will be obedient, but I want them to humble themselves and then cast all their worries on me because
Mm-hmm.
I care for them, right? That's when we really are able to build that real relationship with God. Because it's easy when your life is doing really well, it's easy sometimes to forget God, or it's easy to pray because it's so much easier when you're, or it's harder to pray. It's so much easier when you're in difficult times to then seek out God because you need the help. But when you don't need the help, Lord, my rent's getting paid. Lord, this is happening. I have an abundance.
Yeah.
Sometimes when your relationship hasn't been fortified in the fire, you don't seek God every day. You don't seek his kingdom first. You're more focused on your own kingdom, right? And I've had moments where that's where I was. I was more focused on my own kingdom because I was making the money that I wanted to make. I was in environments that I wanted to be in. I was being exposed to black millionaires and I was going and I was traveling around the US more than I ever have.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is what life can really be. And so, but the problem with that, I was through that process, God started trickling away and I started putting money on the pedestal, right? And money started becoming the idol in that part. And then it took God to humble me more. And then through the humbling, I started to like not just see God for, oh, that's just God. And I believe in God because I believe that there's something larger and bigger than us. But then I started to actually get to know God.
Mm-hmm.
And like I started to really build my relationship with God, and I started seeing, oh wow, money is, and I started reading Proverbs, and I started everything would hit me, conviction, conviction, and I was like, wow, man, how astray I really was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having to figure out how do I come back to God? How do I humbly be a part of this? Like, although I do want to be wealthy, how do I do it in a way where wealth isn't my idol anymore and I can say no to money? And that was my thing. I had to start saying no to a lot of things that I was saying yes to that was bringing increase, because I had to humble myself down. And it wasn't just to say like lose money that way I can get closer to God, but it was what the money was doing to me, which was making me move further away. So that was like my way of like bringing myself back down. And honestly, I started losing things, and I thought I was losing it, and I had this perception of lack in that sense of like, oh my gosh, I'm losing these things.
Yeah.
But the truth was, God was just making room.
Mm-hmm.
God was making room for himself. He was making room for the things that he was going to bring into my life. He was making room for the things he was, because I wasn't always willing to let go, he was stripping it from me.
Mm-hmm.
Because regardless, his will be done.
Yeah.
Right? And once God strips all these things from you, and that's why I read something from Job, because he's a great, it's a great book. It was a great story to show us what that looks like.
Yeah.
Right? And how to keep the faith, even this, how to have faith despite the odds. Right? And it's just being fortified in the fire.
Yeah.
Right? That your relationship with God being fortified, and that's like you said, it's tough. You know what I mean? And it's multiple seasons like that. Like it won't just have one season and you're like, yeah.
Never.
But through that season, you're able to have a testimony, which is hopefully what we're able to give y'all, so that y'all can kind of realize that you're not going through it alone.
Yeah, and I want to go back on the part where you're saying like about humbling yourself.
Yeah.
Because when I first started like going through the process, like I said before, like so many great things have happened for me and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, let's just keep this ball rolling.
Right.
And so like I had got my master's degree, and so I'm thinking, everybody says, oh, you get your master's degree, everything's going to be, great. Like it'll be easy for you to find the job. That was lies. So when I'm going through this process, I'm like, okay, like I've got this master's degree, I've gotten all these like academic awards. I have this list of things, like why wouldn't you, like, come on now, why wouldn't you want to hire me type thing. And so I really had to sit back and like humble myself, like, who even are you? Like, you are going into a whole new world. You're taking a whole change. Like, nobody knows you in this field. And like what field I was trying to go into was public health. And the funny thing about it is like I didn't even like public health. Like I got a whole master's degree with something like that I truly didn't love, just because like it was an opportunity and like I could still play basketball and get a master's degree. Now, granted, there's interest that I have in public health, but it wasn't like something that I was like, oh, like I can't wait to like do this. Like I can't wait to work in this field. But yeah, so I had to go through that process where I really like humbled myself, because I started like expecting things, like I guess you would say like expecting things from God, which is like so like backwards, so wrong. And so like that's when I was like in my prayers, I'm like, God, yeah, I want this. Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you that right now. Can you make it happen? So that's how, and then another thing with that, like with my prayers, like if I didn't see it happening quick enough, because like I said, that process was, very long to go through. If it wasn't happening quick enough, I just keep repeating those prayers. But then like throughout that time, like when I was humbling myself and, learning more about myself, when I was reading in the Bible, like you can't sit there and repeat, like pray for the same thing over and over again and be repetitive, because like, first off, God knows what your heart desires. And so if you keep repeating that to him, it's like, what, do you not trust in his plan?
Right. You lack faith.
Yeah, lacking faith. And that's just ties into one, what I was like doing throughout that process. And so throughout that struggle, I just really had to sit sit back, and like I had to, y'all probably heard me say it so many times, but get out of a cycle, like the cycle of what I was going through. And so I just sat back and let God take control. And I wasn't worried about like what emails that I would get. Like there was a point in time where I was like, just sit back and not even apply to any more jobs. Like take a break from it. Like because
Be still.
yeah, like yeah, be still. And during that time when I finally decided to be still, like I will never forget. I will never forget. Like my mom was doing my hair, and like we were getting ready. I was getting ready to come see you actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was during a time where I wasn't even applying for jobs. Like I had like, yeah, set it aside. And so she's doing my hair. I get an email, and it was literally my first real, and when I say real, like interview process, because the other interview processes were like just on the computer, like go through this type of, it's like the recorded one. I don't really count that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And so that's what happened with that, because I decided to just sit back and let God work. And then,
Come on.
yeah, and another thing that I wanted to bring up during like that time when I was letting, God take control is, I'll bring up the verse. I'll bring up the verse, Habakkuk 2, chapter 2, verse 2 through 3. And it says, Then the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it. For the vision is yet for an important time, but at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. And when I read that, I was like, let me go get my notebook. And I wrote down everything that was like on my heart.
Yeah.
I was like so specific of what, like, I guess you would say my desires were, what was on my heart, even though God already knew, first off.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote it down and I let it be.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, like now where I'm at now, like where today, I go back and I open up my notebook and I see the exact things that I wrote down that God has done for me. And it's like, if you just sit back, relax, and let God do the work, like you will see so much that you have like once desired, or like what has been placed on your heart, and like God has heard you, and it's like come like it's happening.
Yeah, you're living the life that you prayed for.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I feel like is like a reason why, like, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when it refers to that, like contextually, is speaking of like the Day of Atonement,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the day when Jesus returns. But in the end, every day is a day that we should be rejoicing in, because we should have an increased level of gratitude simply because of just having a new day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not waking up and because I feel like when you're lacking faith, you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, like nothing's changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's because you're looking in the micro instead of looking in the macro of like, God is an almighty God. He's going to operate in the impossible. I can't conceive how God is going to answer my prayers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to show up the way I want it to show up.
Yeah.
It's going to happen in a way that it doesn't make any sense of how, but in that moment, I won't understand it now, but in that moment, then I will, right? And that's the kind of God that we serve. So let us be happy and rejoice in it. And then the thing that you were saying, it popped into my head, like with the lacking in faith and stuff like that, was Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6-7. And it says, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him diligently, right? By faith, and then refers back to, is referring to back to Noah. But by faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for saving for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. right? So he who comes to God must believe that he is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you don't have to continuously pray for the same thing over and over and over again. God knows you. He knows your heart. God
Yeah.
God knows exactly what you desire. And if they are in alignment with his will, he will answer them, right? Some things God will not answer simply because the things that God doesn't answer is meant to save you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever your plan isn't going to the plan, it's just because it's going to his. And when I say that, because I love to say that, when I say that, I truly mean that like we have to surrender and be still. And it's difficult in a lot of these situations and a lot of our seasons, even sometimes when we're in our harvest season, our reaping season, when we're starting to get the blessings and stuff like that. Because I made a video about this earlier. I might have said it in a different podcast, I'm not even sure. But one of the things I lack, or I'm still finding lack in, is just having that level of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
To see like, oh, God is blessing me, right? And to see like, oh, and I want to keep it general, like less specific, but more so in the side of things of like, God is operating in your life if you see it or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Regardless, God is doing a new thing. And because he's doing a new thing, you don't know how he's going to operate. You have never seen this thing before. And that's where we should be grateful. That's when we should like be rejoicing in the fact that God is doing something in your life that you have never seen done or happen before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no way that you can dictate how it's going to happen. There's no way that you can predict or hypothesize that God is going to operate in this way. Because no, like you want somebody, you need financial help, and you're like, God, I just want it to happen. But God can easily use somebody else as a vessel to then come to you to then bless you, right? You just never know how it's going to operate. And that's why it's important that we put our pride aside. That's because I seen somebody and he was like, I think it was our pastor. He was talking about it.
I
Yeah,
already know what
right.
you was saying.
And he was talking about the fact that he was going through financial hardship, and he had more month than he had money, and he had went to the service, and his pride was there was a situation where they were giving, they were like blessing people,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't want to stand up and say that he was somebody who was going through financial
Well, yeah,
hardship.
like he didn't know like it was gonna happen. It basically, like the pastor, or whatever, like asked, like, was there anybody who was, going through something? And so
He didn't even want to admit it.
he didn't even want to like raise his hand
Yeah.
at all. But so like yeah, he eventually raised his hand, and then the pastor was like, "All right, everybody, come to the front." He was like, "Man."
Because now it's putting you on the forefront that you're struggling.
Right, and so like he didn't know it at the time, so like he was talking to us, talking about how he was struggling financially, like you said, and then um he got brought up to the front, and then he got to like he had to hold a bucket, and then like everybody was like, all right, like let's bless these like people who are struggling or whatever.
And he felt like he was like in the beginning of it, he felt like it was like a charity case, and he didn't want people's charity. Right. He wanted God to come through, but he didn't know that through the obedience of him even being in the place at the right time,
and putting his pride aside,
that God was going to bless him, because the Bible says that what does it say? Pride cometh before a fall, right? And so if he never would have went to church and he seeked the world instead and was like, I need to go out and chase this money, find a way, hustle, whatever, instead of going to church, then he would have never been in the right environment to be blessed. And then if he would have never put his pride aside again to actually stand up to the calling, and then be able to walk forward and hold the bucket. And then, like I said, he felt like it was a charity case, but then it started being a lot of members started putting things in, and they were like, God bless you, and everything's going to be all right. And he was feeling a type of way, just embarrassed. But then he looked down and he started seeing how full the bucket was getting. And then he said once he totaled everything up, that God gave him more than he even asked for. And he gave a tithe too.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, that's the type of faith that we have to operate in, right? Although it's difficult, we still have to operate in that faith that we know that God is operating. Despite the odds, God is still good.
Mm-hmm.
Despite our situation, despite what we see, because a lot of times that the lack is perceived from our eyes, right? But like from our soul and what we're reading from the context of the Bible, that's where we can find our faith.
Yeah. And just going off that with the lack, I feel like, everybody struggles with that, talking about or like just focusing on the lack. And we often go on social media and see people, taking vacations, being able to do this or that, having nice cars, having, nice houses, blase, blase. But I mean, you're sitting there on your phone. You're blessed enough to even have a phone.
Oh, come
Like,
on.
you're blessed enough to have communication, be able to talk to your family. They can be like miles and miles away from you.
Amen.
You're sitting in a place with a roof over your head while you're looking at social media with Wi-Fi helping you on social media. Your phone bill's paid for.
Talk about it.
Just stuff like that that like just goes right over our head that we don't even like think about sometimes. Like
Little things.
yeah,
Now,
just the little things.
regardless of if you didn't have any of that stuff, if you had life,
Yeah.
if you woke up this morning, right, you're already being blessed. That's already something to thank God for. That's the biggest thing to thank God for.
Yeah.
If you have life, that means that you have opportunity, and that means that you have a purpose that has not yet been fulfilled, and that God is still going to be operating in you. All you have to do is be a willing vessel and be obedient to the cause that God has brought you here for.
But yeah, knowing that this is something that, just being transparent, this is like what I struggle with sometimes. Something that has really just helped me whenever I have those thoughts of lack, or I have those, like, I started feeling like worry, like start getting anxious of what I need to be doing or what I have not done. I literally just stop everything that I'm doing and I just start listing off the things that I have, like have a roof over my head. I got to eat today, just listing off things that I'm blessed with and listing off things that I'm so grateful for, like grateful that my parents are still here living, grateful for my siblings, like just list things off, and then your mind will just switch from worrying about what you lack because you sit there and realize about how much you're blessed with, like, and truly the things that you often are think like you're focusing on the lack is stuff that you don't even need.
Yeah.
It's like usually materialistic things or
For sure.
things that don't even matter. You just want to level up in some type of way, when in reality, the only level you need to be at is God's level. You know what I mean? That was terrible. Okay, but
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. You mean like not on his level, but I understand what you're saying. Like being connected with God and
yeah,
like thinking about what God is asking for, and not all these outside things.
yeah.
Yeah, that's understandable. I understand. It was the flow.
It was. It
The
was
flow
something.
caught you.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, but the truth of it too, though, to like attest to that, is that God would never bless you with something that's going to compromise you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so a lot of these materialistic things, we have to understand, like, even doing the deeper work, right, which I've been talking about recently, is like, why do we want these things in the first place, right? Like, that's like a rhetorical question, because, like you said, a lot of these things don't matter. A lot of these things aren't things that we need. So if they don't matter and they're not what we need, and they're not, most of the time, they're not bringing us closer to God, then they're, then it's, if it's not bringing you closer to God, then what is it bringing you closer to? Right? It's bringing you closer to what the world is telling you to do. It's conforming to the world. It's greed. It's all these other things. It's to just feel like you're better than somebody else.
Yeah.
When the Bible tells us that we're like, no man is greater than another, and to love thy neighbor. And the only way to love thy neighbor is to truly love thy neighbor. It's not to say that I'm better than you, so I look down on you and I pity you, but it's to say, like, think about like a homeless person or someone like a panhandler asking for money. We shouldn't look at that person and be like, I'm better than this person. We shouldn't look at that person and be like, if I do decide to give them something, that it is me pitying that person, but I should look at them on the same level of me, showing them the same grace and the same empathy that I wish somebody would treat me with if I'm in that situation, because you never know what life can bring for you. Because I promise you, nobody woke up and was like, I'm going to be homeless today. Nobody woke up and was like, I'm going to find myself in a difficult situation where I have to ask somebody, put my pride aside to ask somebody, can you help me? Right? Nobody thinks about these different things, and nobody wishes them upon themselves. But yet we find hundreds of thousands, millions of people experiencing that life, right? And if anybody was to ever be in that position, they had the opportunity to just see this video, Lord, I just ask that you allow them to truly know your love, truly experience the grace that you have, to let them understand that they're never too far gone from you, that your love endures forever, and that your grace is sufficient, and that you truly, they're your children, right? No matter how far away, you still care for them. And regardless of like what they have done, that your mercy is way more than their sin, right? And at the end of the day, like for us, sometimes we feel like we're lacking, but like when you think about instead of being micro about your own life, you think macro, you're so blessed, regardless of like your situation, that you should show gratitude for what you do have. Because when you think about you think about the the servants and like being a faithful servant, and you think about that story. I'm trying to think of the story. It's like the story of like the talents or something like that, right? When God, like the master gave five, I believe like 5, 2, and 1, and the first servant gave 5, 2, he doubled it. The second servant gave 2, 2, he doubled it. But then the one he gave 1 was so afraid of the master that he did nothing with it, right? He hid it under the earth so that, because he knew his master was who he was, and he was afraid to lose any of it. And it's the same thing when I'm saying that is like, ask yourself, are you being a faithful servant with what God has already given you? Are you stewarding the things that he's already blessed you with the correct way? Are you giving it back to God? Are you placing God and giving him the authority over everything that he's already blessed you with? Because if you are, then with the little he's blessed you with, he can bless you with more. But if you aren't, then it's some self-evaluation that needs to be taking place, right? But y'all, we just really hope that this spoke to y'all, because like having faith despite the odds is a difficult thing, right? It is no real way to like one way to really get through it. But what we can tell you and what we've done ourselves is get closer to God. That's one for sure way that's going to help you understand what's happening, right? It's not even lean on your understanding, but to lean on his, which is such an amazing thing once you start getting into the Bible for yourself and really growing your relationship with God. Like I said, we really appreciate everyone that's watching this, everyone that's viewing this, and we'll see y'all in the next episode. Peace.